we, instead of talking things out, I mean, we make an attempt to do that, but more so of this is about control and trying to push our particular agenda because we think that it's the right way for us to go. But then it brings a marital conflict. Dysfunction in one spouse. One spouse pressures the other to think and act a certain way, and the other yields to the pressure. Both spouses accommodate to preserve harmony, but one does more of it. The interaction is comfortable for both people up to a point, but if the family tension rises further, the subordinate spouse may yield so much self-control that his or her anxiety increases significantly. The anxiety fuels, if other necessary factors are present, the development of psychiatric or medical or social dysfunction. You heard of a henpecked husband, right? He fits into this category. So the first one talks about a marital conflict where both are pretty headstrong in what they believe in and try to make the other one yield to what they feel. In this particular one, there's one dominant spouse and there's one that's not. It could be male or female. An example of a henpecked husband is that one who just allows things to happen. Right, wrong, or indifferent, to preserve an argument, the guy just might just let it go. To not hear her mouth, he's just going to do whatever it is that she says. That affects the children as well. How? In other words, we're talking about a henpecked husband, so I'm talking about a dominant wife. What does a dominant wife do to the children? Or make him do exactly like his dad would do. We're not saying you, but make his dad would do and make him bend as well. That means that will come out in his marital relationships. He might pick a wife totally different of the moms. He says, you know what, I grew up with all that mouth. I'm not going to marry it. Or he may say there's no other way. And hey, my mom and dad work like that, so that's exactly how I'm going to work. But either way, that's where that influence came from. I saw a couple other hands. So go in the back and work up.
Doesn't that give the kids, I guess, their interpretation of the role?
Yes, absolutely. That's the defining moment for them. And they see that role. So when you have, and so it does not actually help that relationship, because if you're trying to put your son especially in a role of a leader, how can that happen if you're so subordinate to your wife? And I'm talking about overly. That doesn't mean that, you know, I come to my house and my wife says shoes go here. I don't like to put mine over there anymore. Try to keep order and put the stuff where she said she wanted them over here, so I can't put them there. Clothes go in the hamper, not in the chair in our room. That's where my books go. No, but but the idea that there is some order. So I'm not talking about situations where you yield to each other. But I'm talking about a definite subordinate. There's a dominant one. When you look back at your own family of origin, and I ask you the question, who ran your household? Who would you say? Did my dad run it? Did my mom run it? Did they both share it? Neither one of them, we did whatever we wanted to do? You know, that all of the above. And the point is, right, wrong, or indifferent, there's a good side of that and a bad side of that. A dominant mother could make all of the kids passive. Or she could make all her daughters strong. They might all end up in divorces and not married because they can't find a husband like their dad. Or they might end up in an abusive relationship. She yells, he hits. It was only that easy. But that's the dominance. Now what then on the flip side would a dominant father do? What's the effects of a dominant father? And I mean, I'm not talking about a guy that's, I'm talking about the extreme. Yes. What would that do? Yes, sir.
It creates overdominant sons and women who are content with being dominated.
Yes.
And daughters.
Absolutely. And especially in a mindset, and the guy may have never said this, but just in those actions, he makes his son feel that women are definitely less than human, and they can do whatever they want to them. Women are here solely for them, and that's it. And that's because, hey, my mom always did what my dad said. Immediately. I mean, it's like, and then you can see, when you see it really, really bad is when you look at the family, you see a teenage boy talk to his mom like she's the maid. Happens all the time. But that came because of the way the father talked to him. And that can actually work vice versa. You can have daughters that treat their father like he's nothing because mom did that. Now, mom never said treat your dad this way or treat men this way. She never said that. But they picked that up by the way she acted. And the same thing with the father. And it affects the children and how they process relationships. They'll look at the same thing. What if you have a relationship where both people are very passive? both spouses, the father, the husband and the wife are very passive. Yes?
The children will just kind of do whatever.
Yes.
Have no boundaries.
And some will be passive, but in most cases with children, and especially if both passive parents are rich, they got a lot of money, ooh, you're going to have some troubled kids later. Because they are used to the world being theirs and getting everything they want and everything they ask for. And immediately, you know, if you look around in the shopping malls at Christmas, you can see some of these families. Come on, Mom, I said this one. No, that kid needs to. When you see that kind of stuff, that's where it comes from. And then they're so passive. And they're struggling really more so to be that kid's friend, not their parent. There's a huge difference in that. There shouldn't be this, you know, you want to be at some point, and I think that's more of the relationship that you have later with your kids. You want them to be able to sit down and talk to you and tell you anything, but when they're in high school, you shouldn't. I had a buddy that, him and his dad used to smoke marijuana together, and they thought they were close. I'm thinking, you guys are close, you know, sitting, and his dad would buy sometimes, and he would buy, and they had a little puff give going on, and you guys know what that is, do you?
No.
It's puff pass.
That's hilarious. Okay. In the hood we say give. But anyway. Okay, so that's 2 of the 4 relationship patterns. The third, impairment of 1 or more children. The spouses focus their anxieties on 1 or more of the children. They worry excessively and usually have an idealized or negative view of the child. The more the parent focuses on the child, the more the child focuses on them. He is more reactive than his siblings to the attitudes, needs, and expectations of the parent. The process undercuts the child's differentiation, which we're going to talk about in a little bit, from the family, and makes him vulnerable to act out or internalize family tensions. The child's anxiety can impair his school performance, social relationships, and even his health. This is where you have a child, let's say that you don't get along with your spouse, but your second oldest child looks just like your spouse. So the anxiety that you feel in the argument with your spouse, when your spouse goes away to work, you're going to pass it on to that kid. So that kid may say something, and you might look at that kid and you look just like your father. Or the response that the kid gave was a response that the father would have gave. You said that just like him. Do you see how you can easily track that anxiety to like your kid? And you might have, and not unbeknownst to you, might actually treat that kid different because they look like their dad. He would do it all the time. And they wonder, where is this anger? I don't get along with my son. Well, why? And you start looking into it, and well, it looks just like his dad. Well, you don't get along with his dad, and here's mini-me version. You don't get along with him. That's not handing it back.
Usually we say that about your mother. Like
Yeah.
Your mother, your father.
Yeah, that is true. And you can see how the anxiety can pass along through to another child, especially if that particular parent that is passing it down is not getting anywhere with the other spouse. So they'll say things to the kid that they can't say to the father, because the father wouldn't put up with it and the kid doesn't even know what's going on. They're just like, boom, walk right into it. And so their response or a mannerism or something they say or do will be just like the father. And they actually literally continue that argument that way. Happens actually quite a bit. And so then that kid processes all of the release of the tension between the marriage goes through the kid. And then the kid is left to try to process all of this. And then it, of course, manifests itself in his future relationships, his performance in school, and even with his health. The last is emotional distance. This pattern is consistently associated with the others. People distance from each other to reduce the intensity of the relationship, but risk becoming too isolated. Emotional distance is our cheap way of settling conflict. So instead of arguing about it and continuing the argument, we just like don't talk about it. Yeah, absolutely. The silent treatment would be that, yes. They're emotionally distant or cut off. We're going to talk about that. What did you say? Yes, exactly. And then you could go on weeks like that. We just sleep in the same bed, we just function every day, and we just don't really have any interaction. So we can be distant. There are some people who can go on years like that.